Okay, today we're going to focus on hearing. We're going to talk about human hearing, which we talked a little bit about a week ago. At the end of class, we had the video that we went from the vibrations in the air all the way up into the ear. So today we'll continue along that and understand human hearing better, and then we'll understand artificial sensing of sound better. We presented, I think this last time for the first time, the model on the right, which is more of a traditional electronics software view of bringing in information into a system. It's kind of like the HSI model we talked about. It's a little different, but it's flipped. We said that what we're trying to do is get some understanding of the reality, and we do that as humans through our senses, and we do that in artificial or computing systems through the sensors that we use. We talked about there being 5 different types of energies. We talked about forces, electromagnetic energy, forces being also like vibrations in the air, electricity, thermal energy, and biochemical energy. You want to remember those. Basically, we interact with those energies to get some understanding of what's going on in the world. We do that as human systems, and we need to do that as artificial systems. We saw examples of different types of animals that, or insects that have different views, if you will, of reality because they are sensitive to different things. You might remember we talked about the bats, that they have active mechanisms where they send out signals and then look to hear things coming back. Some animals, I think it was a fish, has taste buds all over their bodies. So very different types of things. And those are important for you for a couple of different reasons. One, to understand that as you're developing artificial systems, that you don't necessarily want to constrain yourself to what humans can perceive and see. That's kind of an obvious thing. If you're accustomed to viewing the world with your eyes and your ears, then the first thing you might want to do is have a camera and a microphone that capture that type of information. But if you're aware that other species or other technologies exist to measure electromagnetic spectrum from one range all the way to the other range, then you can start imagining how you can build systems that are maybe even more, have the opportunity to be even more intelligent than human systems, or to supplement human systems so that you can see things that other people can't see. So we detect a small part of the world, animals can do better, and based on whatever information we're going to bring, at some point we're going to create some simulated reality of the world, either to ourselves as humans or to the artificial systems so that they can make decisions and evaluate the world. All throughout this, as we hear it through our ears, it's hard to separate out all the different steps in the HSI model from layer 1 to layer 2, because as soon as you hear something that I'm saying, you extract the words that I'm saying from the concepts that you already have. So things happen so fast, it's hard for us to separate out all those things you saw in the video that are happening from interpreting what someone's saying. So much so that we saw in one of the earlier classes, I had put up some words that had different colors associated with those words. And when you were asked to say the color of the word without saying the word, or vice versa, it can be really hard to do because these things are happening so fast. Right. So when it comes to sensing, basically today we're going to focus on how we hear, what are the frequency ranges that we hear, what are the dynamic ranges of what we hear, so what's the lowest intensity of vibrations that we can hear, what's maybe the highest intensity of vibrations we can hear, And then we'll talk about how we do that artificially. And then we're not going to get to these today, but it gives you an idea of where we're going to go. Yeah.
In that model, what does the effector mean?
Effector is like an actuator, something that does something. So you remember in our HSI model, when it's coming in, those are more receptors or sensors. You're capturing information and bringing it into the system. When you want to do something, in this model, it's called an effector. In our model, I think we use actuator. So it's something that does something. Good question. Okay, so it's a fairly complicated system. How it came to be, I have no idea. That would be more for a geneticist or evolutionist. For us, we have vibrations in the air that are happening right now. I can make them. Someone here is making them because they're opening their check. So those vibrations at different frequencies are coming in. They're causing a movement of this eardrum. Right? So it's basically, think of this drum as a membrane, kind of like the top of a drum set. And it's capturing a combined vibration that's composed of lots of different frequencies and lots of different intensities. And it's that composition of different frequencies and different intensities that tells you, if I say something related to the letter A or the letter B or the letter C, your brain is able to take that information, apply your neural network processing, and make sense of what I say most of the time, unless I'm moving my mouth and actually saying something different, in which case your neural networks, like in the McGurk effect, may cause you to think that I'm saying something different. So those vibrations come in, they move. In the back here, we know that there's fluids in different vessels, if you will. In the cochlea, you might remember there were little hairs. And as the cochlea, as the air, as the, sorry, not the air, as the vibrations move their way through there, some of the hairs were just more sensitive to certain frequencies than other hairs. So basically, those hairs then being connected to electrical pathways that make them their way somewhere to the brain. So somehow your brain learns to make sense of this, the end result of that process. And you're able to, over time, take those signals and process them in some way that you hear what I'm saying or hear what someone else is saying or hear music or whatever it is. So physical vibrations of the air, we call that force. That result in electrical signals that your brain has to learn how to make sense of. We're going to try this. But I have to take my earpiece out or you're not going to hear this. Just a second here. Okay, I think this should work. All right, so what we're going to do is go through here, and then you're going to let me know when you hear something. what we're basically doing here is going up in frequency. So this is 20 hertz here. This is 20,000 hertz. And that means 20 hertz means 20 times every second there's molecules in there are vibrating. 20,000 means there's 20,000 times every second. So, here's something. Okay. Let's try that again, since that was exciting. Let me go back just to make sure. I don't think we heard this one.
Yeah.
You did a little bit, right? All right, let me make one that you're gonna, hold on, let me get up here. Do you hear that one? Okay, we'll go back now. Now that you know what you're supposed to hear. Now, obviously the different frequencies are gonna have sound different. That one I think you don't hear because because I don't have it on a speaker. It's basically like a bassy one. As you go down, depending on how much reggaeton music you listen to and at what volume throughout your life, you may not actually be able to hear some of this anymore, even if you could at some point. Anybody hear that? So it's kind of interesting is that these vibrations are happening. Some people can hear these, some people can't. Most people can't hear things that are slower than 20 hertz. And then the same thing up here. But if you look at all these things out here, if you can't read, this is a hedgehog. So if you can hear it, if a hedgehog can hear it, then you can hear it from a frequency perspective. But if you look at these, there's some outliers here. There's a bat that's sensitive to really high frequencies. There's a porpoise and a whale that you also hear really high frequencies. So even though we may go out and say, oh, it's totally peaceful and quiet, acoustically, that's not necessarily what's happening with the frequency. There may be sounds that we just don't hear. So now we're going to talk about dynamic ranges. So first we talked about the spectral or frequency ranges, which is just things that are moving too slow, we can't really hear them. We might be able to feel them still. Or things that are moving too fast, and because of that we can't hear them, almost regardless of how intense they are. Now what we're looking at is something different, which is the threshold of hearing, which is to say if I have something, so some of those experiments that I just did were in this range and you couldn't hear them, but probably you could hear them, some of you, because they're within your range, but because I didn't have a speaker and this is a little bit further away, the intensity of that sound was too low for you to hear. And if you look at those frequency ranges, it requires a greater intensity of sound for you to be able to hear it. So even though you can hear things at 30 hertz, and you can hear things at 1,000 hertz, the sound doesn't have to be that strong at 1,000 hertz for you to hear it. Whereas at 30 hertz, it has to be pretty strong. And these are in decibels, so the differences between these are substantial. And in fact, you can see that you're really most sensitive to things at around 3,000 hertz. So at 3,000 hertz, you don't have to have that much intensity before you can actually hear it. Now, let's assume that your distribution didn't look like this. And there's no reason to think that everybody's is the same, right? People, as they age, they can have hearing effects. People, depending on what they were exposed to, would. But even if you take that out, we're all a little bit different. So if you were to measure this curve for every single person, you would get a different curve. Maybe not hugely different, but you get some difference. There's going to be some people that can hear 20, some people can hear 30, some people can't hear 40. And then this distribution is going to be different. What does that mean? If I'm hearing, if I'm listening to music, and my distribution is one thing, and his distribution is something else. What's the practical difference? What's the practical meaning? Yes.
I think that people are exposed to different things, like, for example, this exhibition is making a sound constantly, and maybe at a certain frequency, and that frequency, we are accustomed to that certain frequency, and we tend to ignore it maybe. But for example, like I've heard recently that music, and when they're recording music, they tend to tune instruments in 440, like 440 hertz, and they have like they started to tune it a little bit bigger than that, like 442 or 443, because humans' ears are getting accustomed to sounds like air conditioner and something like that, and the frequency we tend to ignore it and don't hear different sounds when they only hear the frequency.
Okay. So 440 would be somewhere around here. And if you look, it looks like there's a flat point that starts somewhere above, slightly above 440. But flat meaning that for the same intensity for all the frequencies in here, you're basically going to have a volume that's the same from a threshold perspective. So let me try to rephrase the question. So let's say that, oh, go ahead.
I think the person would have a richer experience. Hear a different song.
They're going to hear a different.
They're going to hear more.
So they're going to hear a different song. So basically what I'm trying to say is just forget about the mental interpretation for a moment. Just literally what's coming in and what's how it's being converted into the ability for you to observe it even is going to be different. So if I had a killer song that came out, I said, this is the most amazing song I've ever heard. And let's just do an extreme example. Everything in the song was between 20 and 40 hertz. So this is like an extreme example, right? But I could have a song where everything was between 20 and 40 hertz. There'd be some people that would be like, that song's awesome. Right? There were other people who would be like, I can't hear anything. And so that's an extreme example. But if we don't think about extreme examples and just think about the fact that everybody's curve here is going to be slightly different, meaning if you can hear, barely hear, you might actually be able to hear a little bit better out to here or a little less up to here. So you're going to have your own curve. What it means is that when you're hearing something like a song that is a combination of virtually all of these frequencies at different intensities, that you're not all hearing the same thing. Yes.
Is that the same thing as not why people say that someone sounds like this to you, but to me, it would sound like this?
Yes.
You know why? Like, let's say, I know what you sound like, it's really relative. No one really knows what you sound like.
It's individualistic. So what you're hearing is just different than what other people. Now, thankfully, it's not that different, right? But it can be different. We'll see that when we get to sight, that some people can't see certain colors, and so what they're seeing is extremely different.
Yeah, it was about that. It being colorblind. Or, well, I was going to ask about just one regular vision, whether it can be different or not. And well, I thought it probably is because of colorblind. They see colors different.
Colorblind, and then the eyes, as we'll get to next time, are even more complicated because you got focal issues. You maybe have blurriness. You may be able to see some things further, closer. You know, it could be that that person that you're actually with that thinks you look fantastic can't really see all of them. And then they put on their glasses like, how could you see me before? So we don't know what they're actually seeing, right? Although we could maybe try to simulate what they're seeing without their glasses. But yeah, it's different. And I put these dots up here just to, for example, show if I had a sound that was at 50 hertz, that was at 30 dB, would I be able to hear it? And the answer is, as most humans wouldn't be able to hear it because even though they can hear that frequency, it wouldn't be intense enough. From a dynamic range standpoint, and now I'm talking about intensity, I didn't mention that. That's what these other curves. So this is sort of the threshold, meaning that if it's below that, if there's a sound that's below this curve, then most humans can't hear it. But then as the intensity goes up, it's not necessarily linear. It starts out with amplification as you go up through those areas. And you'll see that here. And that's good because what it means is that we have a large dynamic range. We can hear something that's very, very light, and we can hear something that's very, very loud. I'll give you some examples of that. And so here you can hear someone whispering, a normal voice. I don't know if mine's normal, but somewhere similar to that. Maybe some playground activity, a drill, or a jet plane taking off. So if you see people at the airports that baggage handlers and stuff, a lot of times you'll see them driving around with headsets. Right? And the reason for that is that they're exposed to these very intense sounds at these frequencies. And if they don't have it, then at some point they're going to damage their hearing. I don't tend to use or affect air vibrations around 20 hertz when I'm speaking. Most of the frequencies that I'm generating when I vibrate the air are in between this range here. So even though I can hear theoretically somewhere around 20 hertz all the way up to 20,000 hertz, when people are talking, they're usually well within this range. That's what this conversation is. That means most of the time we're speaking, we're causing the air to vibrate in between these frequencies. And most of the time that we're speaking, we're causing the intensity of that acoustical vibration to vary somewhere in between 20 dB and 80 dB. So you have not only the frequencies, but you have the intensities. And all of us are going to capture that in some different way. Now, thankfully, we can learn to pick out words. So if I'm saying a word like word, all of you can hear the word word. Even if you are, even if you looked in the content of what's going into your, in and out of your ear, and we're to see different sensitivities at different times. By the way, there's some more extreme examples of this where people do have hearing damage, and they can relearn how to hear. And so they can still understand the words that you're saying, even though they're not hearing them in the way that they used to be able to hear. So it's kind of like relearning, because they have a different distribution of the sensitivity over the frequency range. Is that?
That be like accent?
Huh?
Like learning to hear someone's accent?
Yeah. I hadn't thought about that for sure. All right, so here we are again looking at our human selves. This is that threshold again. And we are now we're not the Asian elephant, that's this one. We're the human, which means we're this one here. All right? Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is us. And these are some other animals, like a killer whale, a dolphin. These are sea animals, and what we can see there is they tend to not, they tend to not hear vibrations that are lower. So, if we have some animals that are really focused on sounds that are in a higher frequency range, and we play some music that's designed for us at a different frequency range, it's a good chance they're not really going to be able to understand why you like the music. What I'm showing here is, if you remember that conversation piece where humans speak sort of in the center, if we assume that other animals communicate also sort of in the center of their ranges, then it says that if we're looking at an Asian elephant, that they're mostly going to be communicating in this area, whereas if we're looking at a human, they're mostly going to be communicating in this area. So if you want to talk to an elephant, which in my West some people do, then you might need actually some sort of intercom that takes your voice at this one frequency range and converts it into something that represents it at the other frequency range. If you want them to have a good chance of understanding, if you want the elephant to have a good chance of understanding what they're saying, what you're saying.
Is the same be done from elephants to us?
Yes. So there, if the elephant's going to speak, they're likely going to speak in this range. We would want to shift it up because they're going to be speaking in a very low, basic kind of way, and it would be hard for you to really kind of distinguish between the different sounds. It might all just sound like a basic kind of sound. And then you can see for other types of animals, things vary as well. And here I think I'm comparing it to cats. So if your cat doesn't understand you, it may not really be their fault. You might think about creating some sort of device that takes the spectral content and shifts it for the cat so the cat can understand. We're going to see this on vision too. If your dog or your cat's looking at your TV screen, they're not seeing what they see if they look at the reality. I mentioned that last time. So a really cool invention, if you like cats or dogs, is to create a TV where you can shift that so that when you look at it, it's going to look odd, but when they look at it, they're going to see what they would see if they were looking at you in real life. But since most of us aren't dogs or cats, we don't really worry about or think about that. We just assume that they see what we see. Okay, I'm going to shift now to the artificial world, but we're doing really good on time. So, do we have any questions or comments or things that people want to say about sound?
There's no guarantee that cats can understand words, so how do they actually interpret what we say if they can actually understand words?
That's a good question that I can't answer, but I can tell you what I think. I think they do it just like we do. Basically, they have some concepts associated with things that they associate with things over time. And they do it not just in terms of things that they hear and see, but they do it also on smells. Animals like cats and dogs tend to have better smells. So a lot of what they interpret might be more based on smelling than hearing. I think that they associate these concepts over time. The more they interact with you, the more they get to know what you sound like to them, what you look like to them, and what you smell like to them. And a lot of animals like to lick you, so they know what you taste like to them. And I think it's the same. I think sadly I can't put myself into a dog or cat's head, but if I could, I think I would have a simulated reality just like I have a simulated reality. It's going to be different than my reality, but I don't think it makes it any less real. That's what I think. Thank you.
I have a cat, and I moved from the place to another place, and it was really difficult for me to like control him because he wanted to go outside, and I was really scared that if I would go outside, he would leave me or something like that. And the thing is that now I've been letting him go outside because when I scream his name like really loud, I don't know who he is, but I just live in Sultana, and when I scream his name really loudly, he comes out of nowhere. It's just like, he's really happy. Or if I shake his buko, and he hears the most normal, I don't know. It's like those specific sounds. Me screaming his name like loudly and buko. So yeah.
So you'll see, and Lisa Feldman talks about animals also in the book. One of my pet peeves about a lot of psychology books is at some point they always say, and humans are unique because. Now we sit there and think, how do you know that? I think we're different, but I don't necessarily think we're all that unique in terms of having some concepts of the world. And if you take the HSI model, you really don't have to do much to it at all to apply it to an animal and explain how the animals behave. When they're with you, when they're interacting with you, then presumably their consciousness and their subconsciousness is in tune with what the environment's telling them is happening. And when you're not around and things are kind of boring, my guess is that they're imagining things, processing things that they've seen. But I can't prove that. That's what I think. I think it explains a lot when I look at animal behavior. It's easier for me to explain if I make them more human-like than if I don't. Anything else anybody wants to say about sound or anything in general on topic before we talk about artificial sound? If I ever talk about things in this class and you're like, why are you talking about this thing? I welcome you to raise your hand and ask that question. Because all of this connects, and I think that you know that already. But if at some point it seems like, well, why does it matter to me if a cat sees the same thing as the human? Let me know, because these are the types of things that are going to be like your exam. Because I need you to understand that how you view the world is unique to how you view the world. So that when you're trying to capture this world for an artificial system, you try to take out a lot of your preconceptions about how you view the world, and you start thinking about how do I want this artificial system to capture and view the world.
Are those hearing aids?
I've got a slide on that, so let me defer that question. First off, let me hide this thing here. First off, we'll talk about how a microphone works. This is Alexander, presumably a sketch of like Alexander Bell's first microphone for the telephone. And there was a box. We'd speak to the box. And then there was an electrode that was in this conductive fluid. And basically, when it spoke into the box, the bottom of the box would vibrate, and then this electrode, the amount of the electrode that was in the fluid would vary, which would cause then an electrical signal that would be related to the sound, to the voice. So this was a microphone. It's not actually that different from the ear, if you think about it. There's a drum here. There's a box here, right, which as far as isn't quite square, but it's meant to capture the air and let the air sort of bounce around and make its way through to the drum. So that's basically what that's doing. And then there's some way to convert that physical vibration to an electrical signal. So this is an implant. It's a little bit different than what you were asking. Sometimes you just simply amplify the vibrations. In this case, there's actually a microphone that's quantifying those vibrations, processing those, and literally stimulating electrically, so like little mini shocks along the cochlea where normally those hairs would be vibrating and causing electrical signals. So this is effectively hardwiring electrical signals to an electrical transduction process. It's bypassing all the sound capturing, the eardrum part of your ear, and really just going straight to the connections that are going to start going electrically to your brain.
Isn't there like a way to receive other frequencies and then like change it in order for us to hear it?
You could do that here. Yeah, this would allow you to do that. Basically, for people who get these implants, at first, they can't really understand much of anything. So it's kind of like what we were talking about before, where they have to relearn how to hear. Because obviously, the impact of this electrical signal at different points here isn't going to exactly correspond to that sensitivity curve that we saw, right? It's going to be, obviously, it's going to be very, very different. But they're going to get to see you mouth words, and they remember what certain mouth movements corresponded to. They're going to be able to start guessing as to what it is that you're saying. And because, and to the extent that this is reproducible, meaning that a certain frequency will generally always cause a certain area to cause that electrical signal, then eventually they'll learn how to pick out the sounds, the phonetics and the words from the things that they're saying. And they'll teach their brain to hear maybe even exactly what they used to hear, even though they're not really capturing the same thing. And if that sounds weird, then you just remember again the McGurk effect, where you were actually hearing something that wasn't being vocalized. So we've come a long way since the Alexander Bell thing, where you've got all sorts of microphones in here. But generally, they pretty much work the same way, meaning that there's some vibrating drum that's capturing. So you got to capture the vibrations in the air somewhere into a cavity, allow the drum to vibrate, and have that drum somehow cause some change in some electrical signal that you can then process through your electronics. So, you know, it's different than how we hear, but to me, it's oddly very similar to actually how we hear. So this is just a micro sensor, if you will. This company is Vesper. You probably have used their microphones. They're in a lot of Amazon products. The CEO of that company happens to be a good friend of mine. He shared some things that I may share with you later in the class if you have time. But what they're basically making here is a micro-machined microphone that has what's called zero standby power. What that means is the microphone doesn't consume any energy unless you speak. And the idea there, obviously in Amazon and other types of products, is that you can have battery operated intelligent devices that are waiting for you to tell them to do something, but not consuming energy while they're waiting. So these are very sophisticated microphones in the way that they have some amount of signal processing sort of integrated with the microphone itself, so that if you say something that doesn't cause those memories to move in just a certain way, they're not going to turn on the device, because it means you didn't say Alexa. This is the Vesper device, looking at it again, tops down. It's built on a wafer, basically, and with little die that make these devices that are fully integrated microphones. In this case, just like before, the air moves the plates. What's different than before is the plates here they have a piezoelectric film. And that piezoelectric film, the electrical properties of that film change with stress, basically. So as the membrane moves, it causes a variation in the stress. It's depending on how much it's moving at what frequency. You can read that out electrically. That shows you basically what the dye looks like and the electrical circuit that's around it. And what this is in their world, they need to create devices that can always be listening, even if they don't have a lot of power. So they're looking at how long the device can last and still hear. That's what these are. So battery lifetime, 15 months, 12 months, depending on how often that you use it. That's just one type of microphone. There's all sorts of different types of microphones. So what can we do with sound? Here are some of the examples. I'm sure of many. We use it for voice-machine communications, so we can talk to computers now, or computers can talk to us. Audio fingerprinting, that is like what we were talking about before, where you hear my voice in a certain way. And computers can now, or even your phones, can determine the difference between my voice and your voice, so that it will respond if it's my voice, but not respond if it's your voice. At least in theory. Audio classification labeling, voice to text, audio source separation, audio search, transcribing music, voice language translation. I don't know if you guys have you tried using that lately? Real-time language translation? Some moving. It's actually getting pretty good. It uses AI. And then music recommendation, that's looking for similarity in songs and suggesting to you songs that seem to be similar to songs that you've liked. How do you determine similarity? You can do that with AI as well. So these are all applications of sound that relate to AI. I'm just digging in a little bit more in terms of examples. I mentioned some of these already. I'm not going to go through this here in class, but this is a link to a website where they have an example of applying artificial intelligence algorithms to a sound application. I went through that really fast. So now I feel like maybe I went through it too fast. So I think what we should do now is have a discussion where you guys are telling me what we learned today about sound and why that matters for artificial intelligence and science. And not just tell me, but tell the class. So that'll do two things. One, with